Hello everyone, Zelleranth here, and today we're going to take a look at Schacklulu. She's the unit that came out just after Caris in CN, and then when looking at many of the tier lists, you'll see that she's more towards the bottom on most tier lists on the CN side, and there's a good amount of reason I can see probably why. A lot of her kit really isn't anything spectacular that I can see, and it does look like she really would just work best in a Vilder comp. As that is what she seems to be kind of designed around a whole team of them. So not necessarily bad, she's just not really better than many others. Alright, so we take a look at her trait here. At 1 star, she starts immediately with jump, and then she can deal, when she does damage to the enemy, she'll add 1 layer of a bee sting debuff. It's a debuff much like with other units. It doesn't actually do anything, but as you accumulate layers, up to 3 layers, it'll then clear out those marks, and then she'll do penetration damage, and 1 layer of infect will be added to the enemy, doing piercing damage at 20% of the physical attack of Schacklulu. Then as you increase it to 2 stars, you get that additional 5% attack added on. Increases her range skills by 1 grid, so her range attacks will have an increased range. And then it increases that piercing damage to 25%. Then at 3 stars, it goes up to 40%. And then at 4 stars, it improves the attack to 10%. And that looks to be the main one at 4 stars. Yep. And then at 5 stars, which on Shacklulu, 5 stars is really what you're going to want. So that's another big negative against her, is to really get the full amount of her kit. You want to get her to the 5 stars. And at the point she comes out, we're going to have a lot of 5 stars available. But at 5 stars, you have the 10% attack, you have jump, it increases your range to 1 grid, you have the bee sting, does the penetration damage, adds infect. But the big thing is at the end, so when triggered, so when she triggers this mark, so when she gets 3 layers of bee sting, it restores, she gets 1 energy restored to herself, and reduces the cooldown of her charm and stunning talent skills by 1 round, and this can be triggered once per round at most. So at 5 stars, it's going to be kind of key, because when you look at her kit, these 2 skills right here are probably going to be the core of her kit. You're going to at least probably want 1 of them into her core kit than you're using her. Alright, so when we take a look at her traits here, we'll go ahead and look. She has on her normal attack, it's just your standard 50% physical damage twice. And then when we look at her starting skill, she comes with the stab that deals 45% damage 3 times, and when attacking, increases critical hit rate by 20%. This is basically the same exact skill that Cole has, so it's just kind of standard, so everybody should kind of be familiar with this skill here. And then so when we go into her first level skills on the left, we have what's called locking. This is a passive. At the start of her action, apply physical defense down to the enemy with the highest physical attack within 6 squares of her range for 1 turn. So just a passive, whatever is the highest attack person within 6 tiles of her automatically has physical defense down 2 on them. So just a standard little passive. It can be used for some of the bosses and all that, but nothing really all that crazy. And then you have on the right, hunting nature. So this is a skill that we've seen, I think, on Coco and a couple other units. It's a passive that when they're not injured, her movement is increased by 1 square, and when the movement plus charge distance is greater than 3 squares before attacking, the attack is increased by 15%, and this lasts into the end of the action and cannot be stacked. So just a nice little passive. The big thing with that one is increasing the range that she could move. And she's being a seeker, that movement is pretty key in her kit, although not as important as, say, someone is Cole. Alright, so when we look at the level 3 skills, you'll see here Charm. This is one of the skills that was referenced in her trait that can have the cooldown reduced if the trait is activated. So it's an instant, and upon hitting an enemy within range of 3 within a cross-shaped outside of her, it increases dot damage by 30% for 2 rounds and applies an additional charm to enemies in the healthy stats for 1 round, so you can increase the amount of time that they have it. So this is going to be a really good skill for using with Vilder, because she's a Vilder herself, and it basically increases infection, but it can also increase like Scorch and other dot type damage. And this is quite one thing that's kind of unique to her that makes her really good for an infection-based team. So we get over to her other level 3 skill. This is the other skill that's referenced under trait where the cooldown can be reduced. And this one's also an instant that does physical damage. and you select a location within a cross-shaped range of 3. She'll charge that location and attack an enemy's randomly, a random enemy within 2 square range of where she charged to. And if you trigger her trait, then you can release this attack again without consumption, so she can basically do multiple hits of this attack in one go. So that one and this one are pretty good together. I would think if you're actually going to get her, you're probably going to want to get both of these skills because they both have their value. The charm's going to be more if you're an affection-based team with Builder, while Stunning Beauty will be more if you're going for her to be a main damage dealer and you put her out there. So we take a look at her level 5 skills. We have the reactions. We have Curse, and then when she is attacked, damage taken is reduced by 8%. And when she is attacked, she'll inflict vulnerability 2 on the opponent for 2 turns. So this is a nice little skill that if you're putting her out there and she gets attacked, you can debuff the enemy with vulnerable 2. Though with this, it's kind of a risk-reward ratio because she is kind of like Cole, where you might have her out there and you realistically don't want her getting hit. But this one I could see having its value, but when I go over to her other reaction skill, this one's is before being actively attacked by a healthy character. In melee combat, she'll gain 2 dodge, and then she'll switch places with the enemy. So this one makes it where she seems like she'll be much more survivable, because now she can dodge multiple melee attacks, and then she moves with the other enemy that potentially can make it harder for others to hit her. Okay, so if you want to take a look at how this reaction kind of works, it's fairly simple, but it's one where I could find a pretty good show of it. So this enemy's coming up to attack her here. She's putting on the dodge, and then she just swaps places with them. And now she has dodge stacks for 2 turns, so not only did that enemy not be able to attack her, now the next 2 she will dodge their attacks as well. Alright, so we take a look at her level 7 skills. The first one we has Linger on the left, which is a passive. So after you hit an enemy with Charm or Stunning Beauty, so one of her level 3 skills, it restores 1 energy point to Shacklulu, and this skill can only be triggered once per round, so you can't use Charm and then Stunning Beauty and get 2 energy. It only can be triggered once. And if you use this skill on a healthy enemy, they'll be inflicted with Attack Down 2 and Lost. And what Lost is just a reduction in their movement speed by 1, and then their passive skills are no longer active. And then you have on the right, which will be basically her ultimate, the big damage dealing attack. It's called End of the Song, and this attacks random enemies within 3 squares of herself, causing 8 hits. So it hits the enemy 8 times, and each one does a 20% damage. And can trigger her trait multiple times. And so as you know, 3 hits causes her trait, the Beasting, the stacks to go off, and it does that penetrating damage. So this one hits 8 times, so if you already have, say, 1 or 2 stacks, you can actually trigger her trait 3 times. And so you're doing that additional penetration damage, so you can do over 200% of her physical damage with this attack. So this is a big damage dealing hit, and this is kind of like the core thing you're going to want to kill. It'll be really good for single target bossing, because you can basically target a very specific enemy with this attack if they're the ones only around her. Alright, so I have a video up that I found in CN where they kind of show where she can really shine with this attack. So this one is a combination of her turn doing her Stunned Beauty attack first, which is the instant, as well as then following up into this ultimate End of the Song attack. And so you can see this is a Tower of Adversity map. This is where they're facing a Gust. I don't actually know the mutations or what the setup is, but anyone that's done this fight, we've had this fight in Tower of Conquest with the Gust here, and it's a quite difficult fight. And so this is gonna show how she can do a lot of damage in quick succession with these attacks. So she comes in, attacks, and then that goes into the ultimate, where she's just gonna wipe out him in like a single attack here. Finishing him off. So you can see he has just over half his health left there, and it just wrecks him. It's really hard to see because it does all those attacks in rapid succession. So when it comes to her 9th level basic attack skills, we have the Hypnotic Strike, which we've seen on other units, where it'll deal 50% physical damage twice, and then has a 30% chance of inflicting sleep on the target for 1 round. And then the one on the right that's unique to her is it causes 33% physical damage 3 times, and this one has a range to it of 2. Now it can't attack directly next, it has to attack 2 out. And then we look at the 11th skills. The Poison Blade Throw is a physical damage single target attack that deals 35% damage twice, and then applies 2 levels infection. So if you are building an infection team with using the Vilder, this would be one of the skills you would use alongside of it. So you can build up infection really quickly. And then our other one is a support that reduces the area damage received by 50% and grants 2 dodge for 2 turns to her. So just one, if you're going to put her out there and she's in a scenario where she's going to get hit by area damage, you can reduce that quite a lot. And then she has 2 dodge. So this one makes her very, very tanky in the fact that dodge is going to dodge anything that's not area damage. And then if she gets hit by area damage, she's going to soak it up. So of these 2 skills, it really kind of depends on the use for her. But since Vilder really likes to use infection, I probably would see a use of Poison Blade more so than Invasion. This one may be more. And so that is Shacklulu's kit there. Big thing is all about being able to trigger her trait multiple times to stack that damage. And as you know, when we looked at that skill and the traits, you really want to get her to the 5 stars. Because the big thing is with some of these attacks, you'll be able to trigger this multiple times in a single round. And by triggering it, you're going to be able to restore energy. You're going to be able to reset your cooldown of Charm or Stunning Beauty, depending on how you're building her. And so 5 stars is almost, to me, necessary to even get the complete value out of her, because you completely lose that last portion of the skill if you don't have 5 stars. So that can be one of the core reasons I think CNC is on a lower level. Now she can dish out a lot of damage to a single unit, utilizing her level 7 skill End of the Song here alongside like Stunning Beauty. But she also can be utilized for increasing your infection damage with Charm with a big full infection team. Now, the big thing that we see in the future that Tower Adversity has is a lot of enemies are not going to be impacted by infection in the same way that we see now. We kind of see it with some of the bosses where it doesn't do as much damage because they're percentage-based attacks, and in a way for them to be nerfed on boss enemies, they don't do the same amount of percentage-based damage they would on a normal enemy. So overall, Schacklulu to me is a very skippable unit unless you are really wanting to go heavy into the infection side and you just want someone else that can kind of buff it, or you just like the character because she can be used and she can be good in certain scenarios if built correctly. But when we look at where she's coming up in, now we know they're changing up the schedule here, but she should be coming around right after we're going to have Sophia coming up here, and then we're eventually going to have August and Homa. And both of them are really good picks to also get as well. But then we have Caris that was right before her, and I would actually put Caris above Schacklulu in my priorities. And then after Schacklulu, we have Agatha and Terror. And I think most people, if you did the last event, you got to experience Agatha a little bit. She's a nice little DPS. It's kind of a little bit weaker in terms than Sophia or August, but her DPS is different in the way that it can be utilized in Tower of Adversity on maps that have mutations that are not favorable to Sapphire August. And I would actually take Agatha over Schacklulu in that instance. And then you have Terror that comes like immediately after them, or maybe depending on how they change it, Terror could be earlier or not, so you might not even have the pulls to go over Schacklulu. But Terror is a must pull. As soon as Terror comes out, my advice on him is going to be just throw everything you have until you actually get him. So that's Schacklulu in her kit and kind of a look at her, kind of a little bit in depth on her skills. If you like this video, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. I finally just passed the 500 mark, so I'm halfway to the 1,000 for monetization, so thank you for everybody that has subscribed, and thanks for watching.